Some bands seem to have all the right ingredients. They've got the sound, they've got the image, they've got the fan base. But sometimes, just having all the ingredients isn't enough. The 8 bands I'm going to be covering today all found themselves on the very edge of success. But each one ended up as just another case of so close yet so far. This happened for many different reasons, whether due to label disasters or shifting scenes, ill-advised hiatuses to taking just too damn long to make a record. All of these bands found themselves consigned to the what might have been category. So who are these bands? How did they get so close to the big time? And why did it all fall apart? The scene aesthetic came very close to showing us exactly what was possible in the age of social media. In 2005, 2 kids from Everett, Washington got together to create sugary, sweet, emotional indie pop music. Andrew de Torres and Eric Kimberlin set out to make a connection with fans across the world. Only they didn't have a label. But this didn't matter. They put out their first song, Beauty and the Breakdown, on platforms like MySpace, YouTube, and Pure Volume in 2006. A year later,
Mom, take a step towards me so you can figure me out.
For the longest time I thought I'd lost the best of me.
But deep inside of your heart, there is a way that's...
A year later, the song had been played 9 million times on MySpace, and the band's social media following was over 140,000. Not bad for an unsigned band. The duo toured around the USA, but struggled to make ends meet. They were making basically nothing from their social media fame, and they weren't bringing in much money from the road either. Eventually, after seeing contemporaries like Owl City and Brooke Waggoner get signed to major labels and leave them behind, the scene aesthetic called it quits. They did leave us 3 albums worth of music though, which might be worth checking out if you're eager for that 2000s nostalgia hit. Oh, and as for Andrew de Torres, keep him in mind. We'll be hearing from him again later on. My American Heart from San Diego, California mixed cool alternative rock vibes with emotive pop punk, a combination that should have been enough to send them stratospheric. After releasing a couple of EPs as No Way Out, the band switched things up and became My American Heart in 2004. They recorded a full-length album, which didn't make too much of an impact, but their second record, Hiding Inside the Horrible Weather, was a big deal. Critics loved it, fans loved it, and the record-buying public, they almost loved it. The band went to number 28 in the Billboard Heat Seekers chart, always a good indicator of a band that's just about to break through. Tracks like The Shake really demonstrate what we're dealing with here. It's got all the hallmarks of a solid emo pop-punk track, but there's other stuff mixed in there too. There's a little bit of New York post-punk, a la The Strokes or The Rapture, and there's some nice indie rock elements thrown in too. Basically, My American Heart were ticking a bunch of different boxes. They brought together 2 of the biggest sounds of the moment, emo and indie. And back in 2007, this should have been a recipe for success. And maybe it would have been, but we never got the chance to find out. In 2008, the band's label Warcon folded, leaving MAH hopeless. In 2009, guitarist Jesse Barrera quit. The project was falling apart, and the band broke up shortly after. Just one more album might have been enough to push My American Heart into the big time, but the whole thing came to an end just a little too soon. Nashville, Tennessee is definitely a music town, but it's not really known for being a pop-punk town. That didn't bother Matthew Bell and Robert Fort, though. The duo were more focused on groovy garage rock than the country and western their hometown was famous for, and so they put together the Pink Tigers in 2003. The Pink Tigers became the Pink Diablos and eventually the Pink Spiders. After recording a demo EP, the band became stars on the local scene. But it was a show at the infamous West Hollywood club, the Viper Room, in 2005 that would put them on the map. The show got them signed to Geffen Records, and the stage was set for a huge career. But that career never fully took off. The band had some hits. Their album Teenage Graffiti hung around in the Billboard 200 for a while, and single Little Razorblade made some waves in the charts.
Hey, hey, little razor blade, girl, you're so dangerous. She's out of lucking, out of hoping, out of cigarettes, misunderstood with naked pictures on the internet. Every day's a distraction, all the animals just looking for action, and
But the band struggled to live up to their early hype. After leaving Geffen, the band put out another record, Sweat It Out, on Mean Buzz Records. By now, though, the scene had moved on. Kids weren't so interested in that strange collision of sleazy indie rock and saccharine pop punk anymore. So the Pink Spiders were basically done. They did eventually get back together and have actually released 2 more records, the latest just a couple of years ago. But they're a prime example of how a cool look and major label backing aren't always enough to push you into the big time. In some ways, Rookie of the Year were the opposite of the Pink Spiders. First of all, they weren't from a music town at all. They were from Fayetteville, North Carolina, the home of rapper J. Cole, but without the wider musical pedigree of Nashville. And they didn't rush into a major label deal either. Instead, they stuck with indie label 111 Records for years, releasing 3 albums. It was the third of these albums that brought the band closest to stardom. Sweet Attention soared in the Heat Seekers chart, and reached number 9 on the alternative New Artist Rundown. Tracks like What Is Love show us what could have been. This sweet pop-punk number displays the sensitive side of Rookie of the Year, complete with shimmering melodies and 80s-style hand claps.
crazy. Maybe close the door and leave me inside. I miss the fireworks burning. You found a new love now.
This was the high watermark for ROTY's career. They'd never scale these heights again, leaving 111 soon after and putting out 2 more albums on future Destination. So what happened? Did the band just stick around with 111 for too long? Should they have pushed themselves harder? Well, maybe. But let's not forget that Hello Goodbye set the world on fire with their own 80s teen movie-style pop around the same time. And they weren't on a major label either. Maybe it's just a case of being pretty good, but not quite good enough. Florida's There for Tomorrow had it all. A bunch of good-looking kids with cool hair peddling energetic emotional pop punk with chugging rhythms and metallic riffs. What's not to love? They were basically the mainstream-friendly version of Screamo. Their vocals were earnest and heartfelt, but they weren't exactly guttural roars. Their rhythms featured plenty of stop-start dynamics, but they didn't stray into hardcore windmill breakdown territory. To put it simply, it was inoffensive. You might not put it on your wedding playlist, but you could probably get away with playing it in the car while you're driving your grandma to bingo night. So why weren't There for Tomorrow bigger? Why didn't this radio-friendly brand of Screamo make them megastars? It might just be a matter of timing. Their self-titled debut album came out in 2004, the perfect time for this kind of thing. But it came out on local label WP and just didn't get the traction it deserved. Too few people heard it, and so There for Tomorrow stayed underground, kind of unknown. Signing with Hopeless Records should have changed all that. One of the biggest pop-punk indie labels. Hopeless has been a springboard for plenty of talent. But it took There for Tomorrow almost 5 years to release their second record. And by then, the scene had shifted. Emo bands were still scoring hits, but these were established emo bands, entering the second and third stages of their musical evolution. For a band like There for Tomorrow, still not quite broken through, it was just too late. Emo fans just weren't interested in TFT's musical journey, and so the band struggled to make an impact as the decade drew to a close. The 2009 album A Little Faster languished at 181 on the Billboard 200, while 2011's The Verge didn't chart at all.
Keep calling it a crash and burn. Just wait till your turn. You might have time to speak. It's gonna get harder from here. We gotta get smarter to make it out. The taxi you had to take still keep you.
The scene shift and that momentum-killing gap between first and second album put the final nail in the There for Tomorrow coffin. Just Surrender never had a lead singer. Instead, the Dover Plains, New York band had Dan Simons and Jason Mafucci. two high school friends who shared vocal duties. Formed in 2003, it didn't take long for the band to develop their formula. They'd play bright and breezy emotional pop punk, but they'd intertwine this with power pop elements, influenced by the likes of Journey and Bon Jovi. As the social media age began to take hold, the band really found their feet. On pure volume, Just Surrender were a sensation, and this gave the band enough momentum to sign with Broken English Records, releasing debut album If These Streets Could Talk in 2005. What followed was 2 years of super hard work. The band played with basically everyone in the scene, sharing stages with names like Bayside, Boys Night Out, Set Your Goals, and Valencia. By the time they came back with second album We're In Like Sin in 2007, they should have been about ready to explode. Tracks like Your Life and Mine are vintage Just Surrender, prime cuts from a band at their absolute peak.
I can see from across the room there's a tear in your storied eye. I was leaving but I'm coming back.
Just one more hour, and I'll know the truth that separates the right from all the. I'm watching your eyes move slowly up and down.
And yet, they never gained the love of the mainstream. A flurry of lineup changes left the band reeling, while a shift in musical direction resulted in the heavier, Stronger Now EP, which wrong-footed fans and left people wondering just who the band was really aimed at. Another album followed in 2010, Phoenix, released through Razor and Tie. But Just Surrender were getting very close to a surrender of their own. The indefinite hiatus began in 2013, but only lasted until 2017. The band are back together, and even released an EP in 2023, but the shot at superstardom is long gone. Remember our old friend Andrew de Torres of The Scene Aesthetic? Well, that acoustic two-piece wasn't his only musical project of the early 2000s. With Danger Radio, he was doing something completely different. DR are an interesting fusion of dance punk, math rock, and emo style all wrapped up in a glistening, radio-friendly sheen. Take Party Foul as an example. Originally from 2007's Punch Your Lights Out EP, but re-released on 2008's Used and Abused album. It's a dance floor-ready pop track with enough scratchy guitars and rock rhythm to make it perfect for the indie emo discos of the mid-2000s. But trust me, very few indie emo discos were playing Danger Radio back then. They just were nowhere near big enough. People just didn't really know who they were. The band sold a few records through the Photo Finish label, and then sold a few more through Doghouse Records when they released Nothing's Gonna Hold Us Down in 2010. But none of these was exactly what you'd call a hit. So how come? Why didn't this band explode like Fall Out Boy or Panic at the Disco? Or one of the million other bands fueled by Ram and Signed around the time? The problem might have been that they didn't quite fit in. They didn't have the straight-up pop hooks of Hello Goodbye or Cobra Starship, so they couldn't really be considered a pop band. But they weren't quite arty and indie enough to be considered true outsiders, like the pre-Feel It Still Portugal the Man or the Mars Volta. Instead, they kind of fell between both camps. And this probably did them more harm than good. The Junior Varsity formed in Normal, Illinois in 2002, but in fact they were far from normal. Anyone who caught their frenetic live shows in those early years understood this. These guys were something special. A self-released EP got the band signed to British Records, who put out the debut LP in 2003, garnering a modest response from the people who heard it. But when representatives of Victory Records saw the band in all their stage-ripping glory, things really started looking promising. The Junior Varsity signed with Victory in 2004 and released their first album for the label the following year. That album, Wide-Eyed, comes pretty close to emo perfection. Spiky, metallic guitars clash over anthemic vocals, while Nick Dodson's keyboards add depth and texture to the sound. Get Comfortable is surely the standout track on a great album. Asa Dawson winds his cryptic lyrics around a luscious post-hardcore soundtrack, singing about feeling out of place in a town he once called home, lamenting how everyone waves to him, but they just wave out of habit.
Locals read me like I'm not supposed to be where. So
This was as good as it got for the junior varsity. Another album on Victory followed in 2007, but the cinematographic LP would be their farewell. Shortly after the album's release, Dawson announced he would be leaving the band. Losing the core of their group, the junior varsity were left reeling. They did play a show without Dawson, but the writing was well and truly on the wall. An indefinite hiatus followed, and the junior varsity adventure was over. Or was it? In January 2025, the band returned with 2 self-released singles, Guilt and Anxiety. All the hallmarks of classic junior varsity are there for everyone to hear on the new tracks. Maybe there's life left in the old band yet. The truth is actually pretty simple. It's really, really hard to be a successful musician. We've all had friends who poured their heart and soul into a music career, only to travel halfway across the country to play to 2 drunk guys in a bar on a Tuesday night. We all know people who wrote a few songs, recorded a demo, but never got it picked up by radio stations or record label execs. Maybe we did all this ourselves. Maybe we are those people. But for every band that gets signed, there are 1,000 that don't. And for every band that gets massive, there are tons of others who play a bunch of songs that no one ever hears. For the bands on this list, they went so much further than most of us can ever dream of. They never broke through, but they came pretty damn close. And they should all be super proud of that. But here's my question for you. Which of these what-ifs really deserved to make it? Which one definitely should have broken through, become superstars? Let me know in the comments. And please like and subscribe. It means a lot. And of course, thanks for watching. And if you're in the mood for more pop-punk nostalgia, I've got exactly what you need coming right up.